Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Seward, a co-founder and CEO of Quartz, and welcome to Make Business Better, our weekly show here on LinkedIn. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I'm talking with business leaders who are committed to making business better through their work and willing to come on and share practical advice for all of us to apply in our own lives and jobs. For today's episode, our topic is supporting employee well-being using data. In the next 15 minutes, we'll give you the Quartz Essentials on this emerging field of people science. Insight from someone who studied this topic quite a bit, Justin Black, the head of Glint People Science at LinkedIn, who's going to join us shortly. And of course, practical advice for prioritizing employee well-being in your own workplaces. As always, we'll take some viewer questions too, so just place them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. Thank you so much for joining us for this last show for Make Business Better of 2020. But let's start with the Quartz Essentials on today's topic. So we're looking at a chart from Glint. Justin's company will talk. He'll join us in a second. This is charting a metric that Glint's developed called burnout signal rate over time. And I don't know, maybe something happened earlier in 2020 that might account for the surge in employee burnout that we're seeing on this chart. I'll ask Justin about it in a second, but for just a quick taste of what the field of people science can help reveal about employee well-being. And on our next slide, here as well, a number of other ways in which we see employee well-being sort of translated from somewhat nebulous ways of talking about the concept into real data that the companies can take action on in order to address the issues they're seeing and better support their employees. So that's the Quartz Essentials. Now let's bring in our guest, Justin Black. As I said, Justin's the head of people science at Glint, an employee engagement platform that was acquired by LinkedIn in 2018, making this a meta show, our first LinkedIn employee to join on the LinkedIn live show. Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Zach. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Before we start, we're both working from home like so many others these days. And one thing I like about it is it offers this window into our personal lives that we don't usually get to see when we're in the office. So if you wouldn't mind, I know you're working at home right now. Is there something in the background you might introduce us to just get to know each other a little bit?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of great stuff back here. And, I put on real pants today since we're going to be on video. So.
Yeah, I would have caught you if
I would pull down one. This is a Lego of San Francisco. And I lived in New York, but I used to commute a lot to San Francisco. And after COVID, for my birthday, my kids got me this Lego. I have 5-year-old twins. And my son said, "We got you this because we thought you missed your work friends. So we built it together." It's this great moment of, how grateful I was to get some more time with my family, even though I miss my work friends. And so I keep it behind me to remind me.
That's beautiful. It reminds me of a tradition we had at Quartz when we were in the office, which is sometimes to get a Lego set and collectively put it together over time. If you need to take a break, just go off in a corner and do a page or two of the instructions and then turn it over to the next person.
I love that. I'm gonna do that again when we get back in the office sometime.
Yeah, right. I don't know what the virtual equivalent of that would be, but I'm sure someone could come up with it. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining us. I think the field you work in is new enough that I'd be remiss not to start with the most basic of questions, which is, can you define people science? What is meant by that term, the field, and what does it mean to be the head of people science at LinkedIn?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Zach. So we define people science as the study and practice of what makes people happier and more successful at work. And if you think about fields that are integrated into that, it includes things like industrial and organizational psychology, learning and development, also data science, and also design. And kind of bring these together to shift mindsets and habits in organizations. Habits like feedback, conversations, goals, and learning. And our particular approach to it is to take as much of our expertise as we have across Glint and put it in the platform. through algorithms, through inline guidance, through resources, so that every single person in the organization can benefit from that expertise. And then, of course, we have a large team of consultants with 15 to 30 plus years industry tenure who advise executives across industries and regions on how to either transform their or create their first, what we call a people success strategy. So that's the 1 minute version.
Pretty good. When trying to quantify the employee well-being, is that largely a matter of asking employees directly through engagement surveys, et cetera, or tracking other metrics in the workplace? Like how do you end up in the end creating the kinds of dashboards that Glint does to give a view into this really big question of like, how are people doing?
Both are really important. We focus on active feedback, so asking people questions and asking them to give their feedback, and then on correlating those attitudes with outcomes, so that we understand not just what people are saying, but what they actually need underlying that. We can talk more about that. But we also, and we're seeing an increasing use of this. We also find really valuable the types of passive data like number of meetings, frequency of meetings, time spent after hours sending emails. We can talk more about that. But really what we focus on is giving leaders insights on what their people say and what their people need and say they need to be happier and more successful.
Yeah, because I would have to imagine with those more passive metrics, there's got to be a delicate balance to draw, but should like trying to track things that really do matter for or are strong indications of employee well-being, and frankly just being creepy and tracking so much of what employees are doing during the workday.
That's exactly right. I mean, the advantage we have in an active system is that people are voluntarily giving their feedback, and it also makes people feel more involved. And so, yeah, we can measure well-being by asking a simple question: how are you doing? We can measure engagement by asking a simple question: how happy are you working at Quartz right now? And we can correlate those responses to outcomes and get a richer picture. But even the response itself to those questions, gives us immediate signal on how employees are feeling, what they're about to do, and also makes them feel involved in the change that we're going to drive.
I know there's a ton of metrics to track, but could you talk about a few, what you describe as KPIs of employee well-being?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we can ask a simple question, like I said, about how you're doing. I think one of the most fascinating things that we've seen is the ability of natural language processing, so machine learning based reading and coding of comments to surface things we wouldn't have seen otherwise in the data. So someone might leave a comment about burnout on a question related to something else, right? If we might not be asking a question about well-being, maybe we're asking a question about resources. And the comment that they leave when they respond to that question, so I rate resources low and I leave you a comment about why, that comment says something like, I'm so exhausted right now, I can't even think about getting my work done. And there's nothing you could do. There's no resource you could give me to help me. The system's going to see that and tag it as burnout. And so it's a long answer, but what I'm trying to say is ask the specific questions, but also make sure that you're leaving space for employees to give their open feedback, because you'll get a lot of richness and you'll find things in there you don't expect.
So that metric I was showing a chart of employee burnout risk. That's derived. It's not a direct question. Are you or are you not burned out? It's derived from these other signals, the free-form answers.
Yeah, exactly. It's even better in a sense because we're just reading what people are writing in the comments that they're giving and flagging those things. The system tracks about 144 topics at last count, and so 5% is a lot as a slice of that pie. Across the comment space, the topic space.
So I'm a manager. I'm following, let's say, the employee burnout risk or another one of these metrics, and I'm seeing it go in the wrong direction. I understand some of the benefits of tracking these metrics over time, but how do you then recommend managers take action? Is this on an individual level, like someone's been flagged as at risk of burnout? To just an intervention with that specific employee or more aggregate at the team or company-wide level?
We share results at the team level. And the reason is because the best way to be transparent and yet protect confidentiality is to go down to the smallest team, but not to the individual.
Yeah.
Generally, any pattern we see at the individual level is somehow related to leadership and management practices. And so making sure the manager gets some feedback about how the team is doing is really a good place to start. There are things that must be done at an individual level, like understanding what an individual needs in order to feel like they're growing, what specific flexibility they might need to be well at home. That's a one-on-one conversation. But signals about what to have one-on-one conversations about can be team level, right? And so at a team level, I'll see, oh, my scores on recognition are down this quarter. I should lean into that. Like, I should find out what's going on. The first thing I want to do is say to my team, hey, I see the scores went down on recognition. Help me understand that. Like, I want that to be higher. I want you to feel better about that. And let's talk about that. And can we pick one thing to work on? And so we've been studying this problem for a long time. And so we make this sort of checklist and tiny habit-based approach for managers so that they can go through that process of talking to their teams and picking one thing to focus on. But it starts with surfacing that first insight, which is you should dig in deeper on this thing and go have a conversation. So it's a combination of both.
Makes sense. One thing I'm picking up is, traditionally companies send out a employee engagement survey maybe once a year, twice a year, tons of questions, try to cover everything. It sounds like in your field, it's preferable to break that down and just ask fewer questions more often. Is that generally the best practice?
Yeah, it is. I mean, 7 years ago when Glint started pushing this idea of more frequent and shorter, people like me who were established in the industry told Glint they were crazy, that you really needed to ask 55 to 75 questions to get a holistic picture of an organization. It's just not true. If you look at the data and you challenge those assumptions, you could get 80% of the signal with 20% of the items. And that's a lot of value out of a small number of questions. What that allowed organizations to do was pulse more frequently because it's less of a burden. In the early days, we were seeing twice, 3 times, sometimes 4 times a year. We're now seeing 6, 7, since March 2020, as organizations just want to check in more frequently on how people are doing. And the surveys are getting shorter and shorter, right? 5 to 7 questions instead of 18 to 25.
Are these metrics that tend to trend up or down over time or bounce around? Or it's like secular trends, people are feeling more or less appreciated and feeling recognized at work, or is it more akin to stock market? One day it's up, one day it's down.
It's not as stochastic as the stock market, but there is variance over time. We are seeing some trends, though, especially in the correlations. If we look at which scores are correlated to outcomes we care about, performance, retention, customer satisfaction, and the overall concept of employee engagement, belonging is now more strongly correlated with some of those outcomes than career, which historically has been. So my feeling toward my ability to grow my career in this organization is very strongly correlated with my likelihood to stay and perform highly. Now belonging to a sense of connection, a sense of feeling valued and included is starting to surpass that as a more important need I have as an employee at work. And so some of those trends are starting to change and tick up. Same with the burnout rate. Other things we're seeing, just as before, leaders focus in one area and do great. Other things start to fall off and they get this regular signal about where to focus.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask about trends this year in particular. So just to clarify what you were just saying about belonging, you're saying employees are reporting they're feeling more or less like they belong to companies in this very unusual year, 2020.
Yeah, I didn't say yet. I said it's more important. I didn't tell you how we're doing. We're not doing
I
as
imagine
well.
it varies by company.
It does, but overall, we're not doing as well. And so those burnout signals are not showing any sign of abating. Last data we have is from last quarter, and so we'll get new data for this quarter in January. We'll analyze those data, but I'm seeing no sign that it's going to get any better. It might get worse. We're seeing 37% of employees say they feel less connected to their teammates now than they did earlier this year, and 31% saying they feel less connected to their leaders. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot of employees, increasing percentage, say they feel untrusted and micromanaged. So you have this paradox for managers of, how do I help my people feel more connected and supported while also helping them feel trusted and empowered?
Would you attribute those trends to just waving my hands, this broader world, everything that's going on, the pandemic, or more to people work, all of a sudden increasingly working remotely? I mean, of course, I'm sure it's both, but maybe a better way of asking that question is, how do you help tease out for managers the differences there? Because obviously both are important to be cognizant of, but can't really do anything about the pandemic and can do more about what it's like to work in a remote environment.
Yeah, and so it kind of depends on what level of leader you are in the organization. I think for local leaders, it's about doing what we've been talking about, asking your people how they're doing, what they need, and responding to that. We're seeing at the organizational level an increased use of that combination of active and passive data like we're talking about. And so if you're a more senior leader in the organization, you can look at these sets of data and say, so scores on well-being seem to drop on days after high frequencies of recurring meetings. Maybe that's Thursday in your organization. So you know what? We're going to make Thursday a no work day next week, and just put a big hole in that effect. And so it just depends on what level of the organization you're at. From a technology perspective, I would read Sabri Tozen's blog. He's our LinkedIn VP of engineering. I thought he had a really particularly insightful way or take on the new ways of working. And it's something he's clearly thought a lot about. And one thing that stuck out as we think about how managers can help in tangible ways, we know that video calls are great for connection. We also know they can cause fatigue. And there isn't software there that replaces this full experience of being in the room together, right? So we end up feasting with our eyes instead of getting a holistic sense of team or meeting dynamics. And we're missing this organic sense of connection and community. And that's beginning to take a toll. So I would read Sabri's blog. He calls on us to empower employees with technology and collaboration tools that give transparency, ease, and security. And I think managers thinking, how do I give those things to my employees as we collaborate, is a really good way to make sure they do the right thing. There's no silver bullet on those, where each team is different. Each way of working is different. I'm not going to give the same advice to a supervisor at United Airlines as someone on my team who manages 5 consultants.
Makes sense. So, well, maybe you could drop a link to that blog post in the comments when we're done here. I'm sure it'd be of interest to everyone watching. To wrap up, obviously data only gets us so far, in the end, it's about what managers are doing with that information. So I wanted to go through just a few different interventions, so to speak, that the managers could take to address the feedback they're seeing in data like these. In particular, speaking to trends we're seeing this year. We had one question from a viewer about workplace napping and rest as a way to address burnout. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think whatever people need are my thoughts. There's plenty of data to show that resting during the day helps people be more productive. I've certainly felt that since the pandemic. I have taken naps in the past 9 months working from home where I wouldn't have otherwise, although I used to travel for work, so the plane was a nice place to do that. There's plenty of science behind those things working. I don't know that we necessarily need large scale and organizational investments in these things, but we do need to give leaders the budget and the freedom to use these programs if they're relevant to their teams. So things like meditation, napping, team exercise, these are all good. Physical and mental well-being are so tightly connected. One of the things we miss in the chaos and the anxiety is this opportunity to reflect and to connect to what's important. and to prioritize. If you look back over decades of psychological science, those three things will come up time and time again as ensuring good mental well-being, good mental health.
I wanted to hone in on something you said in the middle there. I think typically HR, employee well-being budgets are handled at the very highest level of the company. But it sounded like you were suggesting better to push that down to team leaders to identify what their specific teams need, which might be different from another team in the same company. Did I get you right there?
Yeah, absolutely. Decades ago, the best thing a company could do for most employees was give them a job for life, right? But jobs and businesses evolve and destruct more quickly than they used to. And so the best thing we can do is ensure people can have well-being, have meaningful work, and the opportunity to learn and grow. And the closest person to that issue is going to be the manager or function head. And so knowing that it's important, investing in systemic programs that matter, but leaving some flexibility and empowerment at local levels to respond to that need, I think is probably the right balance.
What does that look like in its ideal form? An open-ended budget for manager to spend as they see fit on employee well-being?
Yeah, I mean, I have this at LinkedIn. It's a great benefit. We have a morale budget. It's every quarter. I know what it's going to be. I make sure I spend it. I wouldn't have spent that much if I hadn't had the budget and had just asked for it. And people really appreciate it. And it's on little bits of recognition or little team events. It can be individual or team-based. It's really powerful. It's the same with hiring and promotion decisions, right? I mean, to the extent that we empower the team with the budget to make raise and promotion decisions and let them make that decision, it works faster and the outcomes are better.
We're finalizing our 2021 budgets here at Quartz right now, so I might take your advice on that. Last question: what was the best thing as a manager you spent that budget on in this very unusual year?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, we spent a lot of it on recognition, individual recognition, which I really value. And then
how so? Like
we use what's called a Bravo. Yeah, we use a Bravo program. So throughout the quarter, if someone does something above and beyond, you send them a note. They get some points. They convert those points into things they can buy. But at the end of the year, we did some fun team events, things like trivia games, virtual trivia games, comedy shows, surprise Santa visits. And so, we did the best we could. In the old days, it was getting together, spending that money on getting together and collaborating. So we're trying to find virtual ways to replace that.
I hope in the new year you have an opportunity to get together with your teams. A constant theme throughout our whole conversation, maybe a topic for having you on again to talk in more depth, seems to be that the conditions of the pandemic, plus just remote work generally, has made individual teams more important than they were before, and perhaps cohesion with the whole of the company less important, or at least less effective. Does that sound right to you? It feels anecdotally what the case in our company and what I've heard others describe in their workplaces. But I haven't seen any data to support that. Have you?
I'll have to get back to you on data answering that question directly, but it's certainly a trend we're seeing is more empowerment of teams, especially from our more cutting edge heads of people success, CHROs.
Got it. Cool. Well, Justin, I really appreciate your time and taking us through this pretty new field of people science. Good luck getting through the rest of the year, and happy holidays, happy new year to you and everyone who's watching.
Thanks. Same to you. Hope everybody gets a good break.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode, and also for Make Business Better in 2020. It's our last episode of the year. We'll pick back up at the very beginning of next year with more great guests. I appreciate everyone who's joined us for these first several episodes. Looking forward to a great 2021. Until then, happy holidays, happy new year. We'll see you next year.